Hello, everyone. Today's show is going to be a replay of a show that I did in January of 2021 called Are You Sleeping? So, this one is for all the chronic insomniacs out there. It's all about sleep. So, enjoy this replay.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Black Mental Health Matters. I'm Dr. Kerry-Ann Williams, and I'm a psychiatrist practicing here in Massachusetts. And my show, Black Mental Health Matters, is a talk show covering everything related to mental wellness in the Black community. And today, I want to ask the question, how are you sleeping? Today, it's all about sleep. So, are you sleeping? Are you having trouble sleeping? And if you are, you're not alone. As much as a third of us have some significant problems with sleep. And that could be trouble falling asleep, that could be trouble staying asleep, or trouble waking up at the right time. So, what is your sleep problem? Now, some of us have a big enough issue with sleep that we look for a medication, a sleep medication. And there are, sleep medications available at your local pharmacy. They tend to be mild, they're not the strong stuff. And they can be helpful, especially if your sleep problems are temporary. For example, sometimes right before a big event, someone might have trouble sleeping, and so they take a mild sleep medication to help them to get a restful night's sleep before they have, a big exam or a big performance. So that would be a kind of a temporary use of a sleep medication. And really, sleep medications should only be used infrequently. Ideally should be used infrequently, kind of only when necessary. Now, sometimes a person's sleep problems can get far enough that they, the medications that they're using from the pharmacy just aren't cutting it. They're too mild. And so that's when, you might consider going to a doctor, maybe your primary care doctor or a GP, and you start talking to them about your sleep. I'm not sure if that's ever happened to you. You go to your doctor, you're like, I'm having trouble sleeping. What should I do about it? And so that, doctor is going to be asking you some questions and trying to assess whether or not they should be prescribing a sleep medication. And they might give you some other general recommendations about how to improve your sleep. But really, primary care doctors, they don't have the time to give you a lot of very close guidance about how to improve your sleep. So when you go to your PCP or your GP, you're primarily going to be talking about medication, sleep medication, which one to use, how much to use, when to use it, that kind of thing. That's really all they have time to talk about. And that's fine. It's fine to use sleep medications, but it's not always the best long-term plan. So did you know that a therapist can actually help you with your sleep? Yes. So it's not something therapists talk about a lot. We don't advertise that we help people with sleep problems. But if you think about it, a therapist is someone who will actually have the time to sit down and talk with you in more detail about what your problems are with sleep and, help you to get to the root cause of what's disrupting your sleep, right? And furthermore, some people have special training in helping individuals with sleep problems. They actually are trained with how to do that. And, that's great if you kind of end up with a therapist that has special training. But even if you don't have a therapist that has specific training in sleep problems, they can help address the underlying root causes that can contribute to sleep difficulties. So that's, of course, the age-old issue of what are you looking for? Do you want something to just make you sleep? Or do you want to deal with the root cause of the sleep problem? Because one is going to give you kind of like a short-term Band-Aid solution, and the other one is going to give you more of a long-term solution to your sleep problem. Now, here's the other kind of dilemma is, I don't know about you, but everyone that I've spoken to is having a hard time finding a therapist right now. There's just not really any openings anywhere. A lot of people are either not accepting patients or they've just been full for a long time. And so what do you do if, you don't want to just stay on sleep medication forever? You want to actually address your sleep problems in a more significant way? Well, you still want to look for the therapist, get on their wait list and things like that, but there's some things that you can do on your own to get a start. And that's what I want to talk about today, is how to get a start on your own, thinking about ways that you can help boost your sleep. So let's talk about it. All right. What's affecting your ability to sleep? Now, for many people, their sleep is affected by two things: what they're doing and or what they're thinking, right? So there's two things that we need to address if we want to improve our sleep. One is, what might you be doing that is contributing to your difficulty sleeping? And what are ways that your own thoughts are getting in the way? Now, some of you already know this, but I'm going to say it because some of you don't. You can actually train yourself to have better sleep. You can train yourself to have better sleep. Now, it's not a simple thing necessarily, and it's not universal, because it's not going to work for everybody. People have different reasons why they might have trouble sleeping. But many of us can actually train ourselves to have better sleep. And so it's just that it requires a little bit of discipline. It requires some sacrifice, not always easy, but completely possible for many of us. So let's start at the beginning. What is your theory on what the cause of your sleep problem is? So I'm going to go over some common causes, and I want you to think about them and think, do any of these describe my problem? For some people, they have trouble sleeping, particularly falling asleep, but sometimes even staying asleep. And it's because they're experiencing some kind of anxiety or excitement. Maybe they're anticipating something that's coming up, and so they can't sleep because of that anticipation. They're thinking about the next day or the next week, and that thought about the future, that anxiety or excitement is affecting their ability to sleep. The other is stress, which is a bit different from anxiety. Stress is more kind of like those of you that may have, hard jobs or difficult situations you're going through. And even if you may not be thinking consciously about the situation, your body might actually be under stress, like your actual physiological systems are just under stress. And that stress can cause muscle tension and different sorts of things that can affect your sleep. The other is pain and physical discomfort. Some of you have chronic pain, chronic back pain, or other kind of muscle aches and things like that, and that can get in the way of getting a good night's sleep. Then there's environmental conditions like lighting, noise. These are small things that can affect sleep, and particularly for people that live in a household with other people might be going to bed at different times, and so when you're going to bed, someone else is up and they have the TV on really loud, or they're talking or laughing really loud in the next room. Those kinds of environmental issues can get in the way of you having a good night's sleep. And then there's also this issue of throwing off your body's internal sleep clock, which I'm going to talk about as well. So did any of those things seem to kind of make sense to you? If you have sleep problems, any of those things kind of affect you? What is your particular issue? So I want to mention a few other things that you should think about that can also interfere with sleep, okay? Some of these things might be interfering and you may not realize, okay? Because some of the things that we think are helpful or necessary for our sleep might actually be part of the reason why our sleep problems are not improving. Okay, so as humans, we have this habit where we kind of like get attached to partial solutions. So if you're not sleeping well and you try some things and those things kind of make things a little bit better, you don't really want to give it up, because the alternative is that you won't sleep at all. And so an example of this might be drinking. Okay, sometimes people have trouble falling asleep and they think, oh, if I have like a little bit of alcohol, it's going to make me feel drowsy. It's going to make me feel relaxed and sleepy. So some people try using a little bit of alcohol to help them fall asleep at night. But the issue is that, firstly, is that really the long-term solution that you're looking for? And the other thing is that it is a false solution. It's something that appears to be a reasonable solution, but it actually is not a solution at all. It actually is making your sleep worse. So here's the thing that we don't realize about alcohol. is that even though it initially makes us tired or sleepy or drowsy, um, there's this time in the middle of the night after you've kind of fallen asleep, about 3 or 4 hours in, your body starts to kind of like experience a little bit of this alcohol withdrawal, right? The alcohol is kind of leaving your system. And as the alcohol leaves your system and you have this withdrawal, sometimes you wake up again, or sometimes you start sleeping very lightly, or you may just have a very unrefreshing sleep. And besides the actual withdrawal of the alcohol leaving your system, even before that, the sleep that the alcohol gives you is not a good sleep. You're not going through the proper sleep stages. It's not a refreshing sleep. So what ends up happening is that this alcohol is a partial solution, and it's a false solution because it's not something you can do long term. It doesn't actually fix your sleep problem, and it could actually be making your sleep worse. It's not sleep that's restorative or restorative. It's not the kind of sleep that's going to make you feel refreshed for the next day or help you to achieve the things that sleep normally helps you to achieve biologically. Okay, your sleep isn't actually getting better. So a second example of a partial solution or a false solution, and don't yell at me for this, but electronic devices. You guys have heard this before, right? How many of you, when you can't sleep, you pick up your phone and you start scrolling through social media, or you watch TV, right? I know I do that sometimes. I'll kind of like pick up my phone and just start looking at Instagram or something. And it doesn't actually make me more tired. You know, it doesn't help me to sleep, but it's something to do because I can't fall asleep, right? Um, and it doesn't really help. Now, watching TV is something that I've heard so many people say, I can't fall asleep unless I'm watching TV or I'm watching a video and things like that. Now, I can't argue with you if you're saying that it helps you to sleep, but what I'm going to tell you is that it's a partial solution. It's kind of not a good long-term solution because it doesn't really fix the sleep problem. It's a little bit of a band-aid, right? So your sleep isn't actually improving in the long run, right? And if you ever end up in a situation where you don't have the TV or the video to help you, your sleep is back to square one because you haven't actually solved the problem. Um, and and here's one of the things that I want you to kind of think about with using electronic devices or TV to help you to sleep at night is that there's this kind of glowing light that comes from these things, right? The TV or the phone or the tablet, there's a glowing light as a background. And what ends up happening biologically is that this light enters your eyes, right? It goes to the back of your eye and into a nerve called the optic nerve. And it delivers a message. And I want you to just take one guess what kind of message light gives to your brain. Do you think that light tells your brain that it's time to wind down, or does it tell your brain that it's time to wake up? Right? Everybody knows the answer to that is that it tells the brain that it's time to wake up. So what ends up happening when you can't sleep, but then you use an electronic device or TV, is that you're giving your brain these kind of mixed signals where it's nighttime and you're supposed to be winding down, but there's all this light giving your brain the message that it's actually time to wake up. So it's not a great solution because light activates the brain. That's the whole thing about, waking up to sunlight in the morning. Light activates the brain. So that's part of the reason why if you have chronic insomnia or you have a legitimate sleep problem, you might want to consider not using TV or not using electronic devices for sleep. Now, if you don't have chronic insomnia, you can do whatever you want to. But for those that have chronic insomnia, sometimes these little things can make a big difference. Okay. The other thing I want you to think about is to look at your medication list. Look at your medication list. Are you taking a medication that could be affecting your sleep? Ask your doctor. Ask them if any of your medications could be causing your sleep problem. Sometimes we don't realize that that's what the cause is, right? Now, once you find out that maybe this other medication that you take during the day is causing your sleep problem, the question you have to ask yourself is, how important is this medication, right? If it's something that you can discontinue, then hey, you have your solution. You just discontinue the other medication. But if this actually is something really important, something that you need to function or that you really need for your health, then you can't just stop the medication that you take during the day. So now you kind of have to work with your doctor, maybe make some compromises that, you have this medication, you have to take it, it's affecting your sleep. So what are my options for sleep, right? So that's something you have to take into consideration. And that's why I say this is not a one size fits all thing. It depends on what's causing your sleep problem. The other thing you have to think about is, do you have physical pain? Okay. Because some of the strategies I'm going to talk about today, they can help to improve your sleep. But if you are experiencing pain, then that's, you may need to actually work with a specialist in chronic pain, and they can actually help you navigate some of the situations that pain brings up. Okay, they may give you maybe different recommendations from what you might hear today. So when it comes to pain, things aren't as straightforward, but there's still things you can do to help yourself. There's still things you can do to make things better, even if it doesn't solve the whole problem. And I'll maybe you can listen on and see if any of these things might work for you. And then, are there other things that cause physical discomfort for you? So here's one example. Do you eat late at night? Because if you eat too late at night, then you may be having trouble falling asleep because your digestive system is very active. Okay. So for example, many of us have had that experience of like eating and then laying down, and then you kind of feel that reflux. It's very uncomfortable, right? Your digestive system is going to take somewhere in the ballpark of like 3 hours to kind of really process the food that you ate, right? So if you're going to eat dinner, you want to give yourself at least 2 or 3 hours before you go to bed, just so that your digestive system has had a chance to do most of its work before you lay down. Okay, or otherwise you're going to have that uncomfortable fullness, or you might just not be able to fall asleep because there's just, your body is still doing a lot of work. Okay, now I know that where I live geographically in the Boston area, dinner is like, I mean, people don't really even show up to the restaurant until like 8 p.m. So I'm not hating on the culture of like eating dinner late. I'm just saying that if you're gonna eat dinner or show up at a restaurant at 8 o'clock, you can't just go straight to bed after that. You need to kind of give yourself some time to digest the food first. Okay. All right. So that's the first part. Just thinking about what your theory is on what's causing your sleep problem and thinking about some of these other considerations, okay? So here's the second thing I want you to do, right? If you're going to work on your chronic sleep problems, I want you to take an inventory, okay? I want you to take a period of time, like 2 weeks, and just really pay attention to your sleep habits. I want you to write them down. Just make a note of things like, what time do you normally go to bed versus what time would you like to go to bed? And what time do you tend to wake up in the morning versus what time would you like to wake up in the morning? And then how much time do you spend in bed? And what do you do when you can't fall asleep? Are you watching TV? Are you reading? Or are you doom scrolling, as they say, through social media on your phone? Is your sleep pattern erratic? All right, so think about what's causing your sleep problems and then take an inventory, take note of what your sleep is like currently. Okay, and for those of you just joining, you're listening to Black Mental Health Matters. I'm Dr. Kerry-Ann Williams, and today I'm talking about sleep. Are you having problems sleeping, and what can you do about it? So now we're at a place where you have thought about the factors affecting your sleep, and you've spent some time keeping track of what your sleep patterns and habits look like. So let's get into it, okay? Let's talk about what you can do to boost your sleep. So number one is you want to set your goals, set your target, a flexible target. You don't want to be too rigid about it. So how much sleep do you think you need each night? Okay, most adults will need somewhere between 6 to 8 hours of sleep, but some people naturally run on less than 6 hours, and that's okay for them. Like, they feel refreshed, they don't feel any different if they, in fact, if they sleep 6 hours, they feel like they've slept too much. But then there are other people who actually need more than 8 hours of sleep a night. And that's okay if you need more than 8 hours of sleep. Everybody kind of has slightly different sleep needs. So you have to come to terms with what your sleep needs are. Okay. I would say if you're one of the people who just needs a lot of sleep, like let's say, for example, you need 10 hours of sleep to feel really restored and rested for the next day, it can actually be a little bit stressful in US culture because we live in a culture that rewards people for, burning the midnight oil, as they say. Our culture rewards people who kind of like miss sleep in order to keep working. We kind of say, well, they're more dedicated. We kind of hail them as more dedicated. And so if you're one of those people that needs to have more sleep to feel restored, it can kind of lead to this perception that maybe you're not as hardworking or you're not as dedicated. That's, I'd say, a slightly toxic kind of culture to have, is rewarding people for like burning themselves out. But you have to come to terms with the fact that you have your own sleep needs, and you have to decide for yourself, how important is it for you to have good restorative sleep? Okay, you have to sort that out for yourself. So that's number one. Set your target. Number two is to know your own internal rhythms, okay? Many of you guys know that we have this internal clock called the circadian rhythm, okay? And that circadian rhythm has a lot of control over when we start to feel that it's time to wind down to sleep. And also some control over when we feel like it's time to wake up. And that internal biological clock, it does tend to run automatically, but there are a couple of things we can change about it. We can actually shift the start time of sleep and the wake up time. So we do have control over that. And that's part of what sleep training helps to do. Okay. So one of the things that affects that internal circadian clock is shift work. Shift work. And a lot of us do shift work. Some physicians do shift work if they have the night shift. Nurses can do shift work, and many other kinds of jobs and careers. Some of the most common shifts, at least in our area, is a 7 a.m. to 3 p.m., 3 p.m. to 11 p.m., and 11 p.m. to 7 a.m. And the night shift, of course, is the one that has the biggest potential to kind of disrupt your internal circadian clock. So people end up feeling drowsy when they're on the night shift and things like that. So it's something that can be reset, but it does challenge our sleep capability. So if you know that your sleep problem is caused by shift work, it's a little bit tricky to solve. Sometimes people recommend taking a melatonin, which you can get at the pharmacy. And the reason that they recommend melatonin is melatonin can help with things like jet lag. It's basically cues your body that it's time to wind down. It's not a sedative. It's a hormone that the body naturally produces. And it just is a cue, like a chemical cue that it's time to wind down. So it helps with falling asleep. And so it helps to reset your natural sleep rhythm because it's using the same hormone that your body would be releasing at that time. So it kind of like is in sync with your body. So that's a claim to fame for melatonin. But that can help with a sleep shift issue. All right, so know your internal rhythms and know where you are on that internal biological clock, and like, do you just need to shift it up or down to kind of sleep at the right times? Number three is to build up a sleep debt, Some people describe it as a sleep drive, okay? So the longer that you stay awake, the more your body builds up a desire to sleep. So all day long, you're building up this sleep debt or the sleep drive, and that debt gets paid off when you go to sleep at night. Okay. So if you kind of cave in the middle of the day and take a nap, you've kind of started paying off that debt a little bit too early, or at least you've kind of dipped into that sleep drive. You've kind of decreased your drive to sleep because you started to kind of satisfy your need to sleep too soon. So when you get to bed at night, you're not as tired as you should have been because you kind of went to bed earlier in the day. So really, if you want to build up a sleep debt, you have to kind of like plow through the day. Don't take a nap. Make yourself stay awake all day. And that will build up that tiredness factor so that you're the most tired at night and you can sleep at night. Now, I know there's a whole kind of cult following, so to speak, of like taking daytime naps. And I said, like, not everybody's sleep is the same. So there are some people out there that they can take a nap during the day and it does not affect their sleep at night. They sleep during the day, they sleep just fine at night. But these are people that don't necessarily, they may not necessarily have the same sleep problem that you have. If they can take a nap and sleep fine at the nighttime, then, then this recommendation is not for them. But for a lot of us that have actual sleep problems, particularly with falling asleep, taking a nap during the day tends to affect our ability to fall asleep at night. So you want to really be aware of building up that sleep debt. All right, so number 4, and if you don't remember anything else of what I talk about today, this is one that you can use even if you don't have a legitimate like insomnia problem. This one is just good sleep practice, okay? So number 4 is to set a wake up time and stick to it. Set a wake up time and stick to it, right? So once you set that wake up time, and it can be flexible. I mean, you could say 6 o'clock or 6:30, but you're still waking up around the same time every day. That is something that you want to do no matter what your time was for going to bed. So even if you ended up going to bed later than you intended to, still get up at the same time every morning. That actually helps to keep your that rhythm, that biological clock, helps to keep that going in the same way. Because eventually, over a period of days, you'll be able to pay off that sleep debt. Just wake up at the same time every day. Because there's this temptation, right? A lot of us know this thing that some of us do where, during the week, we're feeling so sleep deprived because we're going to bed late and waking up early. And so then we say, oh, I'll catch up on the weekend. I'll sleep in on the weekend. And whereas that can help to address some of the sleep debt, it doesn't necessarily address our chronic sleep problem. So again, it's one of those Band-Aid solutions where, yeah, you can pay off some of the sleep debt. It might feel good to be able to sleep longer, but in the long run, you're not actually fixing your sleep problem, okay? So try to set a wake-up time and stick with it. All right, so here's number 5, and I want you to just kind of stick with me on this one. And this one is primarily for people who are having chronic insomnia, okay? If you don't have chronic insomnia, this is not necessarily something you need to do. So I want to go over this principle, and it is the principle of use your bed only for sleeping. So stick with me on this. If you have problems with chronic insomnia, right, you have to consider the concept of the environmental cue, So if you're having problems with sleeping, you don't want to sit in bed while you're reading or eating or studying or working on your computer or things like that would keep you up longer. They make you stay up longer. Because your brain, without your permission, can learn to associate something in your environment with a particular feeling or behavior, right? So for example, some of you have experienced this sensation where you're walking around your house, you're not hungry, but the moment you step into the kitchen, you start feeling hungry. And it's because your brain has learned to associate your kitchen with eating and with food. So you start to feel hungry the moment you walk into the kitchen. That's an environmental cue. Another cue would be, let's say you're, going around and you don't feel like using the bathroom, but the moment you step into a bathroom, all of a sudden you feel the need to go. That's an environmental cue. Your brain has associated being inside a bathroom with having to go to the bathroom. So suddenly you feel the need to go. Now, a similar thing can happen is that your brain can learn to associate your bed with watching TV. So when your head hits the pillow or when you lay down in bed, your brain says, oh, it's time to watch TV now. And it begins to learn to associate that when I lay in bed, I watch TV, or when I lay in bed, I read a book. But it doesn't kind of associate the bed with sleeping, right? So you want to kind of retrain your brain to make this association that when your head hits the pillow, your brain says, oh, suddenly I feel tired. Just like when you walk into the kitchen, suddenly I feel hungry. When you walk into the bathroom, suddenly I feel the need to go. You want that when your head hits the pillow, your brain says, oh, suddenly I just feel tired. You want to set up that kind of automatic environmental cue. So you want to break that that kind of cycle of associating your bed with reading or working or studying or things like that. And the only exception to the rule about using the bed only for sleep would, of course, be sex. You know, you use the bed for sleep and sex. But for anything else like reading, studying, watching TV, you don't want to associate your bed with working or with kind of being awake. So what you have to do when you can't fall asleep, you kind of laying in bed for 20 minutes or so, you get back out of bed, right? So if you can't fall asleep within 20 or 30 minutes or so, you need to actually get out of bed, go somewhere else that's relaxing and quiet and calm, and don't go back into your bed unless you're feeling drowsy and very, very sleepy. And then you can make another attempt at falling asleep. And again, if you lay in bed and you can't fall asleep for 20, 30 minutes or so, you get back out of bed again and you wait until you're very, very drowsy and sleepy, and then you go back into bed. And when you first start doing this, you're going to be out of bed a lot. You might be getting out of bed often, or you might be spending a lot of time out of bed. But this is what we call sleep training. So it requires some discipline and it's not easy to do it. But if you have chronic insomnia, this is something that experts will guide you through. It's one of the reasons why it's helpful to meet with a professional, is that they can go through the ins and outs of this with you, and they can help you to figure out what works for you, for your house, for your lifestyle. And they kind of go through the special considerations you might have. But this is just like the general principle, is that you want to then only be in bed if you're feeling really drowsy or really tired. So then your brain will start to make that association over time with, when you get in bed, this is when you feel tired. Okay, so you want to kind of retrain your brain that way. Now, going along with that, number six is I want to address the thoughts that keep us awake. So number 6 is to don't worry or plan things while lying in bed. All right. When you can't fall asleep, I don't know if you're like me. When you can't fall asleep, do you lay in bed thinking? You know, I'm a psychiatrist, right? So of course I lay in bed thinking. I mean, I'm doing mental chess all day long. Like this is what I love to do. I like to figure things out and find solutions. And I'm thinking, okay, what's going to be my plan for tomorrow? Like I'm always thinking through things. So of course, when I lay in bed at night, my brain is very busy. I don't know if you guys are like that too. Like you lay in bed and you're trying to solve all the problems of the day and plan for tomorrow. Well, if you have difficulty turning your brain off at night, that could be, you know, of course, the thing that's blocking you from falling asleep. And it makes sense, you know, because when you lay in bed at night, it's often the first moment that we've had all day to have like a quiet moment to just kind of think. You know, all day things are really, you know, rushing around and busy. And laying in bed is often that first moment that we have just a quiet moment to just think. So then all the thoughts of the day kind of start flooding in, right? And we can't fall asleep. And it becomes this cue, this environmental cue, that laying in bed at night means it's time to start worrying and thinking and planning. And our brain makes this association with laying in bed and worrying. So what you have to do is break that cycle. And it can be difficult because often your body is tired, but your mind is active. But what you have to do is actually do a similar thing where you get out of bed again, because you don't want to associate your bed with worrying. So you have to get out of bed and then get a piece of paper and start writing down all the things that had started flooding into your mind, the anxiety, the processing, the planning. Just write it all down. Make 2 columns, like one column says here's a problem, the other column says here's a solution, and then you're going to start kind of writing all this down on paper. And you know, things like, okay, here's what I'm going to say to that person tomorrow, here's what I'm going to do to prepare for tomorrow, let me kind of solve this problem. You know, whatever your unfinished business is that you're trying to solve when you're laying in bed at night, get out of bed and write it down on a piece of paper and write it all the way out to your satisfaction. Okay, write until you're satisfied with some kind of emotional resolution to the issues of the day. All right. And once you've done that process of writing it out, and and you also feel very drowsy and very tired, when those two things are fulfilled, you've written everything out to your satisfaction and you feel drowsy and very tired, then you can return to bed so that you can associate your bed only with tiredness and drowsiness. You want that to be the cue, your bed to cue you that you're tired and drowsy. Okay. So here's one of the, there's a few kind of pitfalls though, right, with this kind of like sleep training thing, because as I said, it doesn't work for everybody and it doesn't work in all situations, but it is just something to think about. One is that when you first start doing this, right, like you get out of bed when you can't sleep and you only go to bed when you're feeling really, really tired, is that at the beginning, you're not going to be in bed very much. You're going to be probably, spending most of your time outside the bed, waiting to get drowsy. And so that can lead to you feeling really, really tired the next day. So things might feel worse before they feel better. So you're going to find yourself kind of getting in and out of bed and that kind of thing. So you want to make sure that you're not, operating heavy machinery, or you're not having to do long distance driving, because if you have a job where being more drowsy, it can be detrimental. You may not be able to do the sleep training like this, particularly not on your own. The other thing I can think of is, remember I talked about, like, if your mind is busy, right? You may be laying in bed and your body is tired, but your mind is busy. I don't know about you, but I find that if my body's tired and my mind is busy, I literally can't get up. Like, I can't even move my limbs because my body is so tired, so that I end up laying in bed thinking, because I can't get up. So that can be really tricky. And I think that's where, again, it's helpful to actually go through this with a professional, or if you have the motivation because your sleep problems really are too bad, just kind of push yourself to try to do it. Sometimes what people do too is they try to find a time before bedtime to kind of go through all their worries for the day. Like, they almost set aside like a worry time, and they try to get all that stuff resolved before they ever go to bed. So that's something that you can think about doing as well. The other thing is, if you are prone to falling, maybe you're unsteady on your feet, or you're an older adult, you probably don't want to get in and out of bed if you have a risk of falling. That wouldn't be a good idea for you. And if you have pain, like back pain and things like that, it might not be feasible for you to be getting in and out of bed often. So that might not be a plan that works for you in that situation either. So you may need to make adaptations, is basically what I'm saying. Maybe instead of laying down, you sit up in bed. Instead of getting out of bed, you sit up, or something like that. There's adaptations that you can make to help to still adjust that environmental cue. And there is a special type of therapy called CBTI. CBTI is cognitive behavioral therapy for insomnia. Okay, cognitive behavioral therapy for insomnia. And that's what I was saying, that some therapists aren't trained in CBTI. But if you use one of the therapy listings like psychologytoday.com and you're looking for a therapist, you can probably put in your filter search to see whether they are trained in CBTI. And that is going to be the person that's specifically trained in how to help people with sleep problems. But even if they don't have that specialty training, they can still help with the root cause things. Because I think about something like PTSD that causes nightmares and flashbacks and all kinds of sleep disruption, particularly if your trauma happened at night. You're going to need a specialist to help you, because sometimes sleep medications can't even help with those things. It just depends on the situation. So things can be complicated. And a specialist can help with that. But some of these things can help to maybe just give you a little bit of a boost, right? Can give you a little bit of a boost. And there are a few other things I want you to consider. Okay. What's your caffeine intake like? What's your caffeine intake like? Okay, caffeine. I know that some of you out there are caffeine fiends, okay? But we all know that caffeine makes us alert. That's why many of us drink it, right? But what sometimes we don't realize is that even when that feeling wears off, caffeine is still in your body. So it's not enough caffeine to make you feel alert, but it might be just enough caffeine to interfere with your sleep at night. Okay, so you want to pay attention to, are there any, foods that maybe you're eating late at night that you may not realize, contain caffeine? things like chocolate, certain teas, certain sodas have caffeine in it. Okay. And then you want to have no more than 3 cups of coffee per day, or the equivalent of 3 cups of coffee per day. And you want to stop drinking coffee around mid-afternoon or so. Otherwise, if you drink it too late, it's going to still be in your body. And I know, okay, so I know that some of you are probably kind of like, there are some people out there that can drink coffee at night and still fall asleep. Again, like this caffeine recommendation is for people that are having sleep problems. Because I used to be one of those people, guys. I used to be one of those people that I could drink coffee right before going to bed at night, and I had no problem falling asleep. I remember when I was in college, I was trying to study for an exam. I had like a biochemistry exam the next day, and I said, I'm gonna go get a triple espresso. I don't know if I was trying to like, I don't know what I was trying to do, but I went and got a triple espresso, and I drank it, but I was still able to fall asleep because coffee doesn't really keep me up. But the weird thing is I woke up the next morning and I had this just a strange feeling in my body. Like it felt like I could almost feel the blood coursing through my veins. Like I think it must have been that my blood pressure was high. I think my heart was racing and my blood pressure was high because I'd had so much caffeine around like midnight. And then I had to get up at like, 6, 7 o'clock to get ready to go to this exam. That was the first thing in the morning. And so it just reminded me that even though I was able to sleep, having that much caffeine was still not a good idea, because it can increase your blood pressure. It can basically it activates your physiological system. So I probably didn't get a good night's sleep. So you still want to, kind of avoid caffeine too late, even if you have insomnia. Okay. So just, take care of yourself, guys. All right. The next thing is moderate exercise. Okay, I think you guys have probably heard too that moderate exercise can help with improved sleep quality. And overall, actually, just improving your general fitness level can help with your overall sleep quality. And have you guys ever tried a sound machine? A sound machine. Some people call them white noise machines. And what it does is it creates this ambient background noise, like this low hum. And what that low hum does is it blocks out other noises that could be alerting. So like when you have dead quiet in the night at your house, you sometimes hear little creaks or little noises, and usually those kinds of noises actually activate the body because now your threat detection system has to kind of go online to figure out, did someone break in? Is there something going on? But what the white noise machine does is it kind of like diffuses some of those house sounds, like the creaking of the roof and little things like that can keep us awake. Also, if you have other people in your house that are like talking in the next room or watching TV, it helps to diffuse just the intensity of that sound so that you can get a better sleep. It doesn't completely block sound, of course. You're going to hear, like if somebody breaks into your house, you'll still hear them. But it helps to diffuse some of just those smaller noises that affect us from night to night. And I say sound machine, but of course, these days you can download that on your phone. You can get an app that has that kind of ambient noise, that background noise, and you can get the traditional kind of low hum, or they even have the fancy sounds like sounds of the rainforest, or sounds of rain on your rooftop or wind blowing through the trees. There's all these different kind of ambient background sounds that people can try, and it can help you with falling asleep. If you need to have a little bit of noise, I'm someone that I like complete quiet. I don't need the background noise, but it can be really helpful for some people. For those of you that have babies, you may have noticed that some babies, they sleep really well when they have these little sound machines. Well, it works for adults too. There's some adults that they need to have like a fan blowing or something like that just has this background whir. So if you haven't tried it before, try it out because you may find it helpful to have a little bit of background noise, when you need to sleep. And then there's meditation apps. Meditation apps, okay? Now, I don't really do a lot of meditation, guys, but I tried a meditation app because, as I told you, my issue as a psychiatrist is that, when I go to bed at night, I'm like thinking through and doing problem solving and mental chess in my head. So I actually tried this meditation app that my friend recommended to me. and actually kind of liked it. It was really nice. It's kind of like a Christian app. It had like Bible verses and things like that. It's called Soul Space. SOULSPACE, Soul Space. So it has a more like Christian leaning to it. But what I liked about it, it has meditations for nighttime, it has meditations for the morning. And what I liked about it was that it kind of did this like kind of guided imagery thing. It gave me something else to think about. So rather than focusing on all the worries of the day, it shifted my attention. So now I was focusing on the content of the meditation that the person was walking me through. It was quite nice actually. I didn't do the paid version of the app because I'm kind of a cheapo, but I'm sure that if I had gotten the paid version of the app, I probably would have enjoyed it even more. But meditation apps can be really helpful for people that have where your thoughts get in the way of you falling asleep. It can definitely be very, very helpful. Um, then, consider this last little consideration of like lighting and room temperature. Are you feeling too hot? Are you feeling too cold? Do you like complete darkness to sleep? Do you need to have a little bit of light to sleep? Try to figure out some of these things that can, definitely influence your, your sleep pattern. Like I'm originally from Jamaica, so I like to have warmth, and I'm used to having humidity at night, and so I'm always kind of someone that tends to be warm. So I know that I need that. If I'm too cold, I can't fall asleep. Which, of course, now that I live in Boston, that's kind of a problem. So I just know that I need to have a warm environment. So just figure out for yourself, what do you actually need to sleep, and kind of fulfill that. Don't try to suffer yourself or other people. Now, sometimes it gets complicated if you have someone else, that has a different preference, like, your spouse or somebody has a different temperature they like to be at. So you have to kind of have a compromise, but at least know what you need for sleep. And so that leads me to the last thing, which is just quickly about sleep medications, the role of sleep medications, because some of you might actually need a sleep medication to help you to get started. And the goal for the sleep medication is that eventually you're only taking it infrequently, and that you don't need to take it every night. And so I already mentioned melatonin. Melatonin is probably the best in terms of kind of being a natural remedy. It helps with falling asleep. It's a natural hormone that's produced by the body. So what we're basically doing is just giving the body more of that natural signal. It helps to regulate that internal circadian clock. It just helps the body to know that it's time to wind down. So it's not a knock you over kind of medication at all. So when people have severe sleep problems, they often find that melatonin just doesn't work. It's not strong enough for people with severe sleep problems. And if you wake up again in the middle of the night, don't bother try taking melatonin again. It doesn't really work that way. It's something you just kind of take about an hour before bedtime. And that's really the best time to take it. And melatonin is so mild that you can actually use it for children. So melatonin is one of the number one kind of sleep aids that we recommend for children having trouble sleeping. Another supplement that some people can use for sleep, believe it or not, is magnesium. Magnesium. Now, I don't usually prescribe magnesium, but I do recognize that it is a sleep aid. It's a natural sleep aid you can get at the health food store. I don't have a dose to recommend for you, but you can kind of talk to someone who specializes in natural foods, natural remedies. And if you're on other medications, you might want to check in with your doctor before taking magnesium just to make sure it doesn't interact. So it can really be helpful for sleep and anxiety, but just one thing to note is that magnesium is an ingredient that is in many, many laxatives. Okay. So before you take magnesium, make sure you know the side effects and whether it interacts with other medications and things like that. But it can be a natural remedy for sleep and for anxiety. And then some people take an herb, it's called valerian root. Valerian root. I tried researching this and I couldn't find a consensus on the appropriate dose to take. Like, so for melatonin, I know you can take 3 milligrams, 5 milligrams, don't exceed 10 milligrams. There's well-established dosing for melatonin. Couldn't find an established dose for valerian root. However, it is another natural remedy for sleep. Some pediatricians do prescribe it. So maybe do your own research on valerian root. And then lastly, in children, we sometimes prescribe Benadryl, diphenhydramine, for sleep. And the reason is that Benadryl is, it's a medication for like cold symptoms and it's for allergies. But before going to a prescription strength medication, we try something that's over the counter first. So I would say you want to, before using Benadryl for sleep for kids, you want to check with a pediatrician first, get their recommendations on it. And see whether they agree with you doing it. But as a prescriber, I do use Benadryl sometimes. I prescribe Benadryl sometimes for kids that have sleep problems, just because it's mild, and it's the fact that you can buy it yourself at the pharmacy means that it's generally safe. So other than those things, most other medications for sleep are prescription strength medications. So you have to go to your doctor, have a conversation with them, and find out more. The last thing is, some people ask me about whether or not they should stop taking medications when they start a sleep training plan. I would say when you first start the sleep plan, keep taking your medications. But if you're finding that your plan is helping you and your sleep has improved, then you can start to reduce or come off of it. If you're on a prescription medication, you do have to talk to your doctor before coming off of any of your medications, okay? But definitely try the strategies that I talked about today for sleep. They might not solve everything, but it can help to boost. I particularly like, the meditation and the white noise, the kind of background noise that can help with falling asleep. Sometimes staying asleep, might need a medication to help with that. It's good to talk to a professional, but until you get that appointment, try some of these strategies. Let me know how it worked out for you. Reach out to me on my Facebook page, Dr. Kerry-Ann, Drkerryann, or on Instagram. And I want to thank you guys for listening today to Black Mental Health Matters. And I want to invite you to join me again next Sunday at 1 p.m. So thank you.
All right, guys. Well, thank you for watching, and I will see you again next week. Bye.